Good morning. Happy Labor Day weekend to you all. What a beautiful weekend this is turning out to be. Can you believe it's nice and cool in the end of August? I guess this is the beginning of September. Still, I love this weather. We have a couple of announcements.
Oh boy.
Hello?
Give it a second. Try again.
Hello?
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, next Sunday is Rally Day. Very important day here. And Susan has these wonderful, wonderful shirts. There's adult sizes, children's sizes for purchase. Wear them on Rally Day. We'll all look great. We'll all be like sunshine here. So, there is also Lecto Divina starts this week at 5 p.m. It's always a good time. I recommend if you've ever been before to come. It's really a good time. The best people come, you know. So Joe is still looking if you want to sign up to dig a ditch for the drain system. He had purchased that and be able to start digging. So there's sign-up sheets in there. Feel free to sign up if you like to dig, and if not, sign up anyway. Let's see. This week they are not going to be harvesting the gardens. So if you are wandering by and you see a ripe tomato, feel free to take it because it won't get harvested. So if you want to make a lettuce and tomato sandwich, grab a fresh one. September 15th is the last day for the health kits, so try and get those done. And handbell starts on September 15th at 8:15. I'll get it yet. 8:15. So if you want to learn how to play the handbells, come on in. And if you've already been doing it, bring somebody along. And I think that's it. Did I miss anything? Nope. Okay.
All right, well, on a personal note, I had a shot of cortisone put into my hip this week because I wasn't walking so well, and I had x-rays, and they said, "You're just getting old, Pastor."
Join the club.
That's the empathy I was looking for. Okay. So, anyway, if you see me hobbling around, I'm not in pain, I just don't have a lot of strength back in my hip yet. Therefore, Jesus said again, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd. He does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep." Jesus was talking to his disciples, and he gave us a clue. Actually, he comes right out and tells us why he has come. "I have come so they may have life, and have life to the full." Other translations say life abundant, or abundantly. So what does it mean to have life to the full? At certain times in my life, I've had a very full life, and it hasn't really seemed that great. Sometimes our lives are so full of things, it seems like we run from thing to thing to thing, but we're not really living. I think there's something else Jesus was talking about. I want to tell you a couple of stories today. One of them is when I first heard the call to be a youth minister. And I went to a program called Tent Makers. And Tent Makers was modeled after the Apostle Paul, who he would travel from place to place and he would preach the gospel, but he also had a side business. His side hustle was making tents and selling tents and fixing tents. So he didn't have to rely on the generosity of the people he was preaching to. He could be somewhat self-sustaining. I really wanted to be a youth minister, but churches didn't have much money set aside for that. And so this program allowed a youth minister to be placed in a church for about 20 hours a week. And then for another 20 hours a week, you would get a part-time job. And the church would help you to find that job. And so I packed all my stuff up and I moved to Newberg, Oregon, halfway to the coast from Portland. And in the church there was a guy named Bob Connors, and he ran a construction business. And he said, well, I can always use another guy. And so the church arranged that I would come. A farmer had an old chicken coop, and they remodeled it. They cleaned it up, and it was like the original studio apartment. And sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night thinking I had just laid an egg. But the work part of this was with Bob Connors Construction. And Bob had a rule. What he did is he said, the day starts at 7. Don't be late. And so I got there at 7, and everybody just sat in their cars until 7:30, and then we started. And I went up to Bob and I said, what's the deal? I thought you said we start at 7. He said, we did. Everybody gets a half an hour to get your head right and ready for the day. And if you want to come in my truck with me, then we're going to do Bible study and prayer. And I was so moved by this. And so I spent the first half of the day, first half hour of the day with Bob in his truck, talking about Scripture and talking about and praying. And a number of the other guys that worked for him, some of them had Bibles they would bring, and some of them just kind of sat in their truck. And we got paid for that half hour, which I always thought was really generous. And Bob had a certain way of doing construction. He had a method, a system. And you start, we would arrive and the foundation would be ready. And the first thing we would do is we'd drill holes in some 2x6s and we'd put them all on top of the foundation and screw them down. And then we would, on top of that, start laying the floor joists. And then on top of that, we would sheet the floor joists. And then on top of that, we would build the exterior walls. And then we would build the interior walls. And after working for Bob for a couple of years, I felt pretty confident that I could build a house because I knew the system that he used, and it was a good one. Well, one of the things Bob often did is he found people that needed work, and he would bring them out and train them in his system. And after they worked for him for a couple of years, he'd kind of go to them and say, you know, I think you're ready to do this without me. I'm going to help you get started. Sometimes he would give them some tools, sometimes find them their first job, and sometimes a couple of people that worked for him would go together and they would go into business. And he had been doing this for almost 20 years when I met him. And one day we were working on this house, and the materials we were supposed to have to finish the second floor and start the roof hadn't arrived. And so we didn't have much to do, didn't have anything to do, so Bob took us golfing, which I thought was pretty cool. And then the next day the materials weren't there, and the next week the materials weren't there, and he was going crazy. And so we all got a little vacation. And then the day the materials arrived, he made some phone calls. And all of these guys that worked for Bob Connor Construction, when they first got their start, came back. And they donated their time. And we built a house in 3 days. Finished it, wrapped it. And one day when I was sitting with Bob in his truck talking about this, and I was sharing with him that I was a youth minister, and he said, you know, I was going to be a minister once. When I was a kid, I felt called into the ministry, and so I helped out at my church, and I kind of was like the right-hand man for my pastor. I followed him around, and I tried to do the stuff he did, and I really wanted to be a minister. And I said, well, what happened, Bob? You'd make a great minister. And he said, well, I got in trouble with my girlfriend in high school, and no one ever thought I should be a pastor after that. And so now I build homes. And I said, you know, it's not too late, Bob. There are lots of second career pastors. You could, you know, you own your own business. You could go back to seminary. You can do it part-time or do it online. And he said this. He said, it might look like I own this business, but the truth is that this business owns me. I have a big loan on my truck that I just got. I have a loan for my business. I have a second mortgage on my house for when, you know, I'm paying my employees and they don't have the materials to work. And he said, the truth is I couldn't afford to give up what I do in order to go to seminary. And I thought about that all day as I'm hammering nails. And at the end of the day, I went up to Bob and I said, you know, I think you're one of the best pastors I've ever known, doing exactly what you're doing. Bob really believed in living life to the full. Second story, when I was a college student at Carthage, I was a basketball player and I went out for the team, and there was this guy. His name was Drew, and he was so smooth. I think he might have been a junior or a senior, but he walked differently than everyone. He had different clothes. He drove a cool car. I just was so, like, I just thought, oh, someday I want to be like Drew. And he had these really cool shoes that he wore that were just like, they're kind of like the kind of shoes that make you think he just threw something on. Who cares what I'm wearing? But they were awesome. And so I went down to the Outlet Mall in Kenosha, down by Highway 50, and they had a clearance aisle at the shoe store. And I bought a pair of wingtip shoes on clearance, and they were really cool. And I knew everyone was going to see me wearing these shoes and think, well, he really is great. He's got his life together. And so it was Sunday, and the chapel at Carthage has a long aisle that comes up the front, and people come and they kneel for communion. And I thought, well, this is going to be my chance to show off my shoes, because when you kneel down, the heels of your shoes show, and then people will be able to see Cole Haan shoes. How cool is that? And so I walked up there and I knelt down. I wasn't thinking at all about communion. I was just thinking about how I was impressing everybody. How my phone is going to be ringing later today with girls wanting to go on dates. And I got home after church and I took my shoes off, and I realized when I took them off that on the bottom side of the heel there was a big sign that said clearance. How do you live life to the full? Well, I know that by comparing yourself to other people. I think the saying is the thief of contentment is comparison. When we compare ourselves to others, we always compare the best of what we see in them with the worst of what we know about ourselves. That's not living a full life. Jesus said to live a full life is to lay down your life for your friends. I read a book a while back called The New Retirement-Mentality. And they did a little research project in this book where they interviewed people who had retired, and they asked them, is retirement everything you thought it would be? And they came up with two categories of people, roughly, and people fit into one of these two categories. They either thought retirement was the greatest invention of all time, or they were like, I don't know, I feel restless, and I'm not quite sure where I fit in. And so they looked at all the different things that made up these two groups of people, and they figured something out that's brilliant. And this is not a Christian book, this is a business book. But what it said is that the one thing that almost all of these people who really were loving retirement, he called it squeezing all the juice out of retirement, was that they had figured out how to volunteer their time on behalf of somebody else. They figured out how to give their life away, to lay down their life for others. When Jesus is saying this to his disciples, he had not yet laid down his life. And so I don't think he was talking about dying for the world. What I think he was talking about is giving of yourself, of your time, of your resources, setting your ego aside and being a servant. He showed us that at the Last Supper as he shared the meal with Judas, who would betray him, and Peter, who would deny him, and yet he washed their feet. How to live life to the full is everything about learning how to give your life away, a little bit at a time, for your friends and for complete strangers. And Jesus, he showed us how to do that. In our creed, we say that he was crucified for speaking truth to power, and he was raised by God to live forever so that we might truly live.